The kingdom of Erevan was a place of sharp contrasts. Gleaming spires and golden halls rose high above stone streets worn smooth by generations of toil. Nobles in silk and velvet paraded proudly through marketplaces where beggars huddled beneath faded cloaks. At the heart of the kingdom sat High Lord Darien's great manor, a sprawling estate that looked down on the village square like a predator eyeing its prey. His rule was absolute. The people bent knee at his word, for to cross him was to court ruin. Among the many who served in Darien's manor was Zara, a young servant girl with hair the color of midnight and eyes that gleamed like the stars themselves. Though her life was one of endless labor, scrubbing floors, tending to fires, running from cruel commands, Zara carried within her something rare, something untouched by the grimness of her world, a gift for dance. She had learned it as a child, taught in secret by her late mother, who had once danced freely at village festivals before the nobles banned such merriment among common folk. When the stars rose high and others slept, Zara would steal moments to move in the shadows of the kitchen or the empty halls, feet light, arms weaving through the air as though shaping unseen beauty. The movements gave her solace when nothing else could. But beauty was not welcome in Lord Darien's halls, not from one so lowly. It was on a rain-slick morning, the sky swollen with gray, that Zara's fate would twist. She had been carrying a tray of goblets through the manor when the lord's son, Edwin, a haughty youth with a taste for cruelty, blocked her path. "You think yourself above your place, don't you?" he sneered, knocking a goblet to the floor with deliberate ease. "Always moving so lightly, thinking none notice." Zara bowed quickly, heart pounding. "Forgive me, my lord. I meant no disrespect." But Edwin's smirk widened. The moment had drawn the gaze of his father and the gathered courtiers. They watched with thin smiles, waiting for sport. "She flits about like she owns the place," Edwin said. "A dancer is she? Then let her dance, for all to see." Lord Darien's cold gaze settled on her. In his eyes there was no kindness, only amusement and disdain. "Very well," he said. "If the girl loves to dance, let us grant her stage and audience. From this day forward, she shall perform in the square each morning. But not as a free creature. No, let her wear the chains that mark her station." A ripple of cruel laughter followed. The decree was swift. Before Zara could protest, guards seized her. Heavy iron shackles were clamped around her wrists and ankles, thick chains binding her movement. She was dragged from the manor to the village square, her heart thundering with terror and disbelief. By midday word had spread through the village. Merchants paused their bartering, mothers held their children close, workers gathered in uneasy clusters. The nobles' guards forced a rough circle of space at the square's center. And there, beneath the cold eye of Lord Darien from his high balcony, Zara was shoved forward. "Dance," one of the guards barked, tugging at the chain. For a long moment she stood frozen, humiliation burning through her veins. The weight of iron pulled at her limbs, the gazes of the crowd like daggers on her skin. But then she saw them, among the nobles and jeering onlookers, the faces of her people. The baker's daughter who'd shared crusts with her, the stable boy who'd smiled in passing, the old woman who had once known her mother. Their eyes held no mockery, only sorrow. And something more. Oh. A deep breath filled her lungs. She would not let them see her broken. Slowly, deliberately, Zara lifted her arms. The chains clinked and dragged, but she moved still, step by step, swirl by swirl. Her dance was no longer the free, joyous motion of secret nights. It was heavier now, defiant. A voice in motion where words were forbidden. The crowd grew silent. Even among the nobles, murmurs stirred. "She still dances," someone whispered. "Even in chains." Day after day the cruel punishment continued. Each morning Zara was led to the square, chains biting her skin. Each morning she danced. At first to survive. Then because something deeper compelled her, a need to show that her spirit remained untouched. The villagers began to return in greater numbers. Some came with small tokens, bread left on the edge of the square, a flask of water. Others simply watched in silent respect. Among the people the story spread, the girl in chains still dances. Lord Darien noticed, of course. But to him it was of little consequence, a curiosity, a passing distraction. He believed the girl would soon falter, her strength spent. He did not yet understand what had been set in motion, and neither did Zara. For deep within her, with each chain movement, something old and powerful stirred. A rhythm older than the stones beneath her feet, older than the lords and their cruelty. Her mother had spoken once of it, in hushed words. "There is magic in the dance, child, when it comes from the heart. A power that no chain can bind." Now, beneath the weight of iron, beneath the gaze of tyrants, that truth began to waken. The days bled into one another beneath gray skies and the iron rule of the Lord. Each morning at the ringing of the market bell, Zara was led into the square. Her wrists and ankles bore the weight of the shackles. Her limbs bruised where the cold metal chafed her skin. The guards would fasten the central chain to the old stone at the center of the square, and then step back with sneers on their faces. "Dance, girl," they would command. "Let the people see your folly." The first few days the pain was almost unbearable. Her muscles ached from the strain, and her pride burned hotter than any fever. She had wept silently in the privacy of the cold servants' quarters at night, too proud to cry in front of them, too shamed to stop her tears when alone. But by the fifth morning something changed. She rose before the guards came for her. She washed herself at the basin with cold water, her trembling hands smoothing the bruises on her skin. And when the door opened and the guards barked for her to follow, she held her chin high. She would not let them win. The square had changed too. No longer were the crowds gathered merely to jeer. Now they came with curiosity and with something deeper flickering in their eyes, sympathy perhaps. Some of the merchants had begun to arrive early, setting up their wares in time to see her forced performance. A handful of common folk lingered near the edges, their gazes sharp and thoughtful. By the 10th morning, a strange hush would fall over the square when Zara appeared. The guards would lock her chain, the cruel order would be given. Yet when she began to move, a subtle magic seemed to fill the air. It was not the magic of sorcery, no visible sparks or shimmering runes. It was something older, something quieter. Her dance, though bound by iron, held a rhythm that seemed to echo in the hearts of those watching. Her steps were slow at first, measured, deliberate. The chains dragged across the stones, clinking softly in time with her movement. Then the sway of her arms would follow, graceful, controlled, her body bending and rising in defiance of the weight that sought to hold her down. The bruises, the iron, the humiliation, all became part of the dance. With each movement she spoke a language beyond words. "You will not break me." The villagers began to whisper among themselves. In the taverns, at the wells, in quiet kitchens after dark, her name was spoken with something approaching reverence. "She still dances. She holds her head so high. Did you see today? The way the light caught her arms, like she was calling something." Even some of the noble-born began to notice. The younger courtiers, ever hungry for gossip, would lean from their balconies to watch her chained performance. Some laughed behind lace fans or velvet sleeves, but others watched in silence, thoughtful. In Zara's heart, a new fire took hold. The pain remained, the humiliation pressed hard against her spirit, but beneath it, something ancient stirred. The words of her mother returned to her in fragments. "There is magic in the dance, child, when the heart speaks louder than the world." By the second week, the whispers grew bolder. It was said that some among the watchers had felt a strange pull when Zara danced, an urge to sway, to move even as they stood still. A baker's wife confessed to her sister that her feet had shifted without thought. A stable boy claimed his hands had tingled, itching to follow the rhythm. Rumors spread, whispers of old magic, of hidden power in the girl's chained defiance. And Zara? Each morning she danced with greater strength. She no longer danced for the guards, nor for the nobles who came to gloat. She danced for herself, and for the silent ones who watched with wide eyes. Each step, each turn of her body, was a refusal, a promise. "You will not have my spirit." In the manner, Lord Darien noticed the change as well. His amusement soured to annoyance. When his steward reported the gathering crowds and the strange murmurs, the lord's lips curled into a sneer. "She is but a girl in chains," he scoffed. "Let them whisper. Soon enough they will tire of her spectacle." But the people did not tire. Nor did Zara waver. In the shadowed corners of the square, an old sorcerer's eyes watched closely, an ancient traveler wrapped in faded robes unseen by most. He watched the girls dance each day, stroking his beard in thought, for he recognized what the others could not. The girl's heart was awakening an old, slumbering power. And soon it would be more than whispers. The sky hung low with clouds that morning, as if the heavens themselves bent down to watch the square. Rain had threatened all night but never fallen, leaving the air thick and expectant. Zara, as always, was led out in her chains, wrists bound, ankles heavy with iron. The guards no longer jeered so loudly, nor did they need to. Their cruelty was steady, practiced. She walked now with steady steps, each clink of the chain against the cobbles a note in the strange song her life had become. The square had changed in these past weeks. At first a curious crowd. Then a devoted one. More villagers came each day, not openly in defiance of Lord Darien, but because something unspoken drew them. They stood in silent witness, merchants pausing mid-sail, children tugging at mothers' skirts to watch. It was then that the old traveler arrived. Few noticed him at first, an aged man wrapped in a faded cloak, leaning heavily on a gnarled wooden staff. His beard was long and white as sea foam, his eyes dark with a depth that saw beyond the skin of things. He appeared just after sunrise as the guards chained Zara to her place. He made no grand entrance, no cry of announcement. He merely stood beneath the awning of a narrow shop, eyes fixed on the square, waiting. When Zara began her dance, slow and deliberate beneath the weight of iron, something stirred in the old man's gaze. His fingers tightened slightly on the staff. His lips moved though no sound passed between them. Old magic, so long forgotten, he thought. To others, Zara's defiant movements were impressive, courageous, perhaps even beautiful. But to one who had studied the deep flows of the world, her dance revealed more. There was a rhythm to it now, beneath the visible motions. A pulse, an ancient echo rising from the well of her spirit. The sorcerer's eyes narrowed. He had seen such things only in the oldest of writings, stories of dancers who wove the will of their hearts into motion, their defiance stirring forces older than kings. It was not common sorcery. No spellbook taught it. It could only rise from suffering met with unbroken will. As Zara's body turned, the chains singing softly beneath her, the traveler's staff gave one quiet tap on the stones. Those few nearby startled, glancing at him, but he did not move. Zara had noticed nothing at first, her focus bound within the dance, her gaze distant. But then, in the pause between steps, she caught the gleam of strange eyes upon her. The old man's gaze locked with hers, deep, knowing, as if he saw through flesh and bone into the very core of her. The moment was brief. A single breath. Yet it left her skin tingling. When the dance ended and the guards unchained her wrists, Zara's limbs trembled not from exhaustion, but from that piercing gaze. As they led her toward the manor's side path, a hush fell among the villagers. It was then that the traveler moved. He stepped forward with a grace that belied his age. With a nod to the stunned crowd, he approached Zara's path. The guards frowned but hesitated. His bearing carried a weight of presence none could ignore. Without a word, the old man held out his hand. In his palm lay a simple charm, a small disc of dark wood, carved with a spiral symbol older than any noble line. A leather cord looped through it. The wood gleamed faintly as though touched by starlight. "For you, child," the traveler said, his voice deep and soft. "A gift, and a warning." The guard nearest him growled. "Step aside, old man." But the sorcerer's gaze barely flickered. His words pressed through the air, meant for Zara alone. "When your heart speaks louder than your chains, others will hear." With a flick of his wrist, the charm landed in Zara's open palm. The guards roughly pushed her onward, muttering threats, but the old man made no move to stop them. His purpose was fulfilled. Zara's fingers closed around the charm as though it burned. Her pulse thundered in her ears. The spiral carving was warm beneath her skin, alive. The old man's voice echoed in her mind. "When your heart speaks louder than your chains." All that day, through the endless scrubbing and serving, her thoughts would not leave the strange gift. When night fell and she curled in her corner of the servants' quarters, the charm rested against her chest, hung on a makeshift cord beneath her thin tunic. Who was that man? How had he known? And what had he seen in her dance? What power, if any, had begun to stir? The next morning dawned bright, the storm clouds broken at last. The guards arrived as they always did, barking for her to rise. Zara obeyed in silence, her heart steady. Beneath her tunic, the charm pressed against her skin, a small warmth, a pulse in time with her own. When she stepped into the square that day, something was different. The air seemed to hum faintly. The crowd gathered faster, eyes sharper. A low expectancy filled the space. Even the guards seemed uneasy. Zara's gaze swept the edges of the square. The old traveler was gone, no cloak, no staff in sight. Yet his words remained. As the chains locked around her once more, Zara breathed deeply. Her heart swelled, not with anger but with something fiercer. Determination. A truth older than any punishment. When she moved, the dance was no longer just defiance. Each step now sang with her spirit's voice. Each sway of her arms, each pivot of her hips, carried a silent message into the air. "I'm not broken. I will not be." The watching crowd felt it. The baker's wife wiped tears from her cheek. The stable boy swore his feet had moved of their own accord. A noblewoman gripped her fan tightly, breath caught in her throat. And though none could see it, from the spiral charm at Zara's chest a faint shimmer pulsed outward, like the ripple of a stone in water. When her dance ended that day, the silence was deep, heavy. The guards unchained her with more haste than usual, eyes wary. In the manor, Lord Darian's steward reported in hushed tones, "More are watching, my lord. They say, strange things are happening." Darian scoffed, but his fingers tapped restlessly on the arm of his chair. Zara returned to her corner that night, exhausted in body, alight in spirit. The charm lay warm against her heart. The traveler's warning echoed still. When your heart speaks louder than your chains. She did not yet know what would come. But deep within her, the song had begun. Word spread through the streets and alleys of Erevan. The girl in chains danced still. Not once had she faltered. No cruel jeer or iron weight had broken her. And as each day passed, her audience grew. Merchants arrived earlier to stake good spots in the square. Weavers set up looms nearby, their fingers pausing mid-thread to watch her dance. Even farmers from the outlying fields began making excuses to visit market more often. The nobility could not ignore it either. The younger ladies whispered behind silk fans, the young lords joked, nervously, about the sway in her movements. But not all watched in awe. From his high window in the great manor, Lord Darian observed the shifting tide with a tightening jaw. His punishment had been meant to shame her, to crush the spirit of rebellion in the eyes of the people. Instead, this peasant girl, this nameless scrap of a servant, was becoming a symbol. Rumors reached his ears. They spoke of magic in her movements, of villagers who swayed without meaning to, of eyes that could not look away when her chained feet began to move. "It is nonsense," he told his steward one night. "Superstitious fools see spirits where there is none." But his voice was taut with something colder than anger, jealousy. This was his city. His word was law. No peasant girl would draw such attention while he sat unseen. The people should speak of his power, not hers. The next morning he summoned the captain of the guard. "Bring heavier chains," Lord Darian commanded. "Let her dance longer until her strength breaks. I will hear no more of her defiant step." "As you wish, my lord." Before dawn, the guards entered the servant quarters. Zara stood already awake, the small wooden charm resting against her chest. The soft warmth of it had kept her through the chill night, her heart beating steady beneath its pulse. She knew before they spoke, there was a new hardness in their eyes. "Move, girl," the captain barked. In the square, the sky was gray with the promise of rain. A fresh crowd had gathered, their faces expectant. But when they saw the guards bring out the new shackles, iron bands thick as wrists, with chains twice the length and weight of the old, a collective murmur rippled through them. "What is this? Will she even stand?" The captain ignored them. His orders were clear. He bound Zara in the heavier irons, the cold metal biting into her already bruised skin. When the last chain was fastened to the stone, he sneered, "Dance then, if you still can." The first step was agony. The new chains dragged with brutal force, each movement now a battle. Her limbs, already tired from weeks of this cruel ritual, screamed with every shift. Sweat beaded her brow after only a handful of motions. But she would not stop. The words of the traveler burned in her mind. When your heart speaks louder than your chains. And so, through the growing pain, she danced. Each step became deliberate, carved from stubborn will. Her arms moved slower now, not from defeat but from strength drawn deeper. Each motion was a vow. "You will not break me. You will not take my spirit." Among the watching crowd, the shift was felt. The murmurs stilled. Even the youngest children sensed the gravity of the moment. This was not mere defiance, it was a battle of will and heart. The chains may have weighed her body, but they did not touch her soul. Hour after hour, the guards forced her to continue. When at last the captain signaled an end, Zara's limbs trembled with exhaustion. Her breath came ragged, her skin flushed with the effort, but her gaze was unbroken. She met the captain's eyes as they unchained her. "You have not won," her look said, though her lips remained sealed. That night, in the servants' quarters, her body ached with weariness beyond measure. But as she lay curled on the thin cot, one hand pressed the charm to her heart. Its warmth steadied her. And the whispers returned. "She danced still. She does not break." Some even said they'd seen the chains shiver, not from her steps alone but from something else, something beneath the surface. The next day, Lord Darian watched from his balcony. His lips curled in fury. "She must yield," he snapped to his steward. "More weight. More hours." So it was. The chains grew heavier still. Her required dance extended. The guards jeered, yet their voices held the nervous edge of those watching something they could not explain. Each morning Zara rose before the summons. Each morning she wrapped the charm's cord around her neck and faced the square. Her body weakened but her will sharpened. Each link of iron, each forced step became a silent promise. You cannot own my spirit. By the third week strange things began to happen. Villagers closest to her dance swore they could feel a pulse in the air, a deep hum that stirred beneath her movements. A merchant's wife clutched her chest and whispered, "It feels alive." A weaver's loom thudded to a rhythm matching her steps, though no hand moved the shuttle. And in the shadows, unseen, the old traveler watched once more, his eyes gleaming. "She is close now," he murmured. "Soon the chains will speak." The storm came suddenly. Dark clouds rolled in before dawn, thick and heavy as iron, their edges tinged a sickly green. The air hung damp and breathless. By the time the guards fetched Zara from her narrow cot, thunder was already grumbling across the hills. She rose slowly. Her limbs ached as they never had before. The heavier chains from the past weeks had left new bruises, deeper than skin, muscles trembling with each breath. Her bones felt hollow, her breath thin. Yet still she stood. The charm lay warm against her chest, a steady thrum beneath her palm. It had been her constant comfort, her only ally. Now, in the growing dark of the storm, it seemed to pulse faster, as though aware of what was to come. The guards fastened the heaviest shackles yet around her wrists and ankles, links thick as a man's thumb. The long chain between them dragged against the ground with a deep scrape. They sneered as they secured the central iron loop to the stone in the square's center. "Let her dance through this," one muttered. But the townsfolk, gathered despite the brewing storm, watched in silence. Over the days their awe had shifted to something deeper, sorrow, even reverence. They had witnessed her suffering, her unbroken spirit. Now they saw how pale she had grown, how gaunt. And they felt it, the edge of something nearing its limit. Thunder cracked overhead as Zara began. Her feet moved barely. Every step dragged the chains across slick stone, her breath shallow with effort. Her arms rose and fell, slower than before yet no less graceful. The storm winds whipped her hair across her face. Raindrops spat from the sky, cold and sharp. Her thin dress clung to her skin, the weight of it joining the iron. Still she danced. And the people watched with aching hearts. Mothers clutched children close. A blacksmith's apprentice wiped a tear from his cheek. Merchants stood beneath awnings but made no move to leave. How much more can she bear? They wondered. Then, in a single instant, the breaking point came. Zara's body gave out, not from lack of will but from exhaustion too deep to fight. Her knees buckled beneath her. The chains jerked as she fell forward, her palms scraping stone. Gasps rose from the crowd. The guards stepped forward at once. "Enough," barked the captain. "Drag her out." But before they could touch her, something happened. The charm at her neck flared, no longer a faint warmth but a fierce, golden light. It spilled through the thin fabric of her dress, casting strange shadows on the wet stones. The guards froze mid-step. The crowd went utterly still. Zara stirred. With a shuddering breath, her palms pressed to the ground. Her muscles screamed, yet beneath the pain something else rose, deep, fierce, alive. A voice that was not of the body but of the soul. No more. Slowly, impossibly, she pushed herself upright. Her hair clung wet to her face. Her breath came ragged but her eyes burned bright. And then, for the first time, she stopped. No steps. No forced sway. No obedience to the cruel command. She stood still. The chains hung slack around her, heavy, unmoving. The silence in the square deepened until even the storm seemed to hesitate. Drip by drip, rain fell around her, washing the blood from her scraped palms. The charm's light pulsed, steady, powerful. And then, without music, without movement, the chains began to sing. Not by her doing, nor by any force seen. A soft, resonant hum rose from the iron links, as though they themselves echoed the defiance in her heart. The sound shimmered through the storm air, low and haunting. The people stared. Even the guards faltered. And then, the strangest thing of all, one by one the villagers began to sway. It started small, a tilt of the head here, a shifting of feet there. A merchant's wife moved her hands without thought. A young boy's shoulders began to rock gently. They did not know why. It was not a conscious act. But the deeper force that pulsed from Zara, through her stillness, through the humming chains, called to something within them all. The storm wind rose again, whipping banners and cloaks. Yet amid the chaos the people moved, not in mockery or jest, but drawn as though by an ancient rhythm. Zara's breath caught in her throat as she felt it, not power but connection. Her heart spoke louder than her chains, and others were hearing. The old traveler, unseen among the crowd, nodded once. It begins, he thought. Thunder cracked above. Lightning forked through the sky. And still Zara stood unmoving, her chains humming softly, the square alive with subtle motion. Lord Darien watched from his balcony, his face pale with fury. His punishment had unraveled before his eyes. The girl in chains had done what he never imagined. She had made the people dance. The first few moments after Zara stopped dancing seemed to stretch out into forever. She stood in the center of the square, drenched in rain, iron chains hanging from her wrists and ankles like dead weight. Her limbs trembled but did not move. Her head was bowed, but her heart blazed like a living flame. And from the simple wooden charm at her chest, a soft, pulsing glow lit the storm-dark space, steady as a heartbeat. The hum of the chains deepened, as though the iron itself breathed in time with her will. Then the ripple came. It began as a sensation, a shiver in the air, unnoticed at first except by the most sensitive. The old traveler at the edge of the square, hood low over his brow, felt it in the marrow of his bones. Ancient magic awakening, drawn not by spell or rite but by raw human spirit. The ripple spread out in slow waves, invisible but irresistible. Those nearest to Zara reacted first. A seamstress standing beneath a cloth awning blinked rapidly, her arms beginning to sway though she had no intention of moving. A grizzled fisherman shifted his feet in a strange rhythm. The baker's boy dropped his basket of rolls, his hands suddenly lifting as if guided by unseen strings. Around the square, eyes widened. Voices gasped. And then more joined. A nobleman's daughter, dressed in fine silk, began to turn slowly, arms lifting in graceful arcs. Her stern-faced mother started to call her back, only to feel her own legs shift beneath her, her feet sliding into an unfamiliar step. It was as if the earth beneath them had changed, as though the square itself pulsed with life and motion. A merchant stumbled and tried to clutch the stall for balance. His arms, instead of gripping the wood, twirled outward in time to the rippling hum. Guards posted at the square's edge frowned and barked orders, but even they soon found their boots tapping of their own accord. One guard's spear clattered to the stone as his body began to sway, muscle fighting against some deeper pull. Nobles, merchants, peasants, none were spared. The ripple of magic had no regard for rank or coin. It moved through all alike, weaving them into a single living dance. In the manor's high window, Lord Darien looked on in disbelief. "What trickery is this?" he snarled, slamming a goblet to the floor. "Guards, stop her." But none came. From his balcony he could see them, his proud soldiers caught like the rest, arms and feet moving in slow, strange patterns. Their faces showed a mixture of awe and terror. In the square below, the storm raged on, rain soaking hair and clothes, but the people danced. Not in joy, not in revelry, but in the grip of something older than any law, a power born of injustice endured too long. Zara remained still at the heart of it all. Chains slack, head bowed, heart burning. She had felt the moment when the ripple burst forth. It had not been summoned, it had simply come. Released from her very being, a force shaped by weeks of suffering, by every insult, every bruise, every forced step that should have broken her but did not. Her will had risen stronger than her chains. And now, those chains hummed with her spirit, their curse turned outward upon those who had imposed it. The sorcerer's words echoed in her mind. "When your heart speaks louder than your chains, others will hear." She had not known what that would mean. Now she saw it. Even Lord Darien's kin, his niece, his cousins among the nobles, were caught. Their polished boots danced the same rhythm as bare peasant feet. Silks swirled with rough-spun tunics. The false divisions of class melted in the storm as all moved to the same unseen song. No longer was Zara alone in her suffering. The weight she had borne alone now echoed in every heart, every limb forced to move in time with her. Tears stung her eyes. Not from sorrow, but from release. Let them feel, she thought. Let them know the weight they placed upon me. Still she stood, refusing to dance further. The chains, once instruments of her torment, now served as her voice, their hum filling the air, each vibration speaking truths no words could convey. Around her the dance quickened. The old traveler's eyes gleamed beneath his hood. He whispered to no one in particular. "It is done. The curse has turned." The magic swelled with each passing moment. Zara could feel its reach stretching beyond the square, through the streets of Erevan. She imagined servants in kitchens pausing mid-step, stable hands swaying in rhythm, children caught in the echo of the unseen pulse. Somewhere within the manor, even Lord Darien himself staggered as his legs jerked unwillingly. Fury twisted his features. "No," he roared to empty halls. "I will not." But already his feet had begun to move, slow and unnatural. In the square below, a strange harmony rose from the chaos, hundreds of bodies moving as one, driven by the magic of her will. The villagers would remember this moment for the rest of their lives. They would speak of the girl who danced in chains. Of how she stood, unbowed, and turned a curse back upon her oppressors. Of how, in the heart of a storm, nobles and peasants alike were bound by her defiance. And Zara herself, tired, battered, yet burning bright, understood now what the old traveler had meant. The chains were no longer her prison. They were her voice. And that voice had made the world move. The storm thundered on. Rain lashed down in cold sheets, soaking hair, skin, fine cloaks and ragged tunics alike. But no one fled. No one could flee. In the square of Erevan, beneath the iron sky, nobles and commoners spun in strange, unwilling rhythm, driven by a force none could resist. Their movements grew wilder with each passing moment. It was no joyous dance. Their faces showed no pleasure. Wide eyes darted about, some mouths gaped in wordless cries as bodies turned and stepped and swayed against their will. The young daughter of a merchant sobbed openly, her slippers slipping on wet stone as her limbs jerked to the rhythm. A stern-faced magistrate spun helplessly in a clumsy circle, his cloak twisting around him. The captain of the guard, known for his cold discipline, staggered forward in a half-lurching waltz, the haft of his spear clattering uselessly across the ground. And in the midst of it all, Zara stood, unmoving, chains slack around her, her soaked hair plastered to her face, the small charm glowing softly at her throat. The hum of the iron links filled the air, the same steady pulse that had begun this strange magic, now woven through the storm winds, thrumming in the hearts of all who watched. On the manor balcony above, Lord Darien gripped the stone rail with white knuckles. "This is sorcery," he shouted into the gale. "Black witchcraft. Stop her. Stop her." He whirled on his steward, who stood frozen in terror. "Send the guards. Take her down now." But even as he spoke, the truth struck him. The guards were useless. He could see them, his finest soldiers, trained to fight even the fiercest raiders, now caught in the same enchantment as the rest. One guard's armor rang with discordant notes as he twitched and spun, the heavy breastplate weighing him down. Another had dropped to her knees, hands flailing in jerky rhythm across the stones. "No," Darien gasped, horror dawning. "This cannot be." And below, in the square, the murmur of realization began to ripple through those who still retained some awareness. "It is her," a merchant whispered, eyes locked on Zara's still figure. She did this." "It's her spirit," cried a midwife, clutching her apron as her feet refused to obey her will. "She's turned the curse back on us." "She was meant to break, but she never did," another voice shouted. "She's stronger than their chains." The truth was dawning, slowly at first, then rising like the tide. The people saw. This was no accident, no dark sorcerer's meddling. This was Zara's will unleashed, born of suffering, forged in silence, now rippling through the very air. "She stood against them, and now we feel what she felt," cried an old blacksmith, his heavy boots skidding as his body swayed beyond control. And from beneath his hood at the edge of the square, the old traveler, the wandering sorcerer, watched with calm eyes. "She has done it," he murmured. "The chains are no longer her prison. They are her power." Lord Darien, wild with rage, stormed from the balcony down into the manor halls, shouting orders. "Summon the court mage. Bring the priest. Break the spell. I command it." But none came swiftly. The manor guards themselves had fallen prey to the strange force, struggling through half-steps and stumbles, their blades useless in twitching hands. Panic spread. Within the square, noble ladies shrieked, their skirts tangling as they spun helplessly. Proud lords cursed, trying to grab at walls or posts, only to have their arms betray them, caught in the same strange dance. Some villagers, those with hearts kinder, more open, wept openly now, not in fear of Zara but in guilt. "She suffered alone, and we watched," an old woman cried, tears lost in the rain. "Now we know." A baker who had once jeered at Zara's chain dance stumbled past her, face twisted in remorse. His mouth opened as if to beg forgiveness, but no words came, only the rhythm imposed upon him. And Zara, through exhaustion, through the trembling ache in her limbs, felt it all. She heard their cries. She saw the revelation in their eyes. The chains around her wrists sang with the pulse of her spirit, not wild vengeance but a fierce, unwavering truth. You cannot cage the will. You cannot bind the heart. She had stood through weeks of humiliation, of pain. Had bent but never broken. And now the very force meant to shatter her had turned outward, showing all the weight of oppression they had allowed. A low voice reached her across the square. "Zara?" the traveler called softly. Through the mist of exhaustion she met his gaze. "You hold it now," he said, voice sure. "This power is yours. Their hearts begin to see. Do not fear it." And in Zara's chest the warmth of the charm deepened. She understood, this was not merely magic, it was justice. A reflection of truth too long buried. Above, in the manor halls, Lord Darien raged still, but beneath his fury fear gnawed at him. He had seen what the people now saw. This girl, this chained dancer, wielded no sorcerer's staff, no royal bloodline. Her power came from within, from the strength of one who refused to be broken. And worse, the people believed in her now. As the nobles stumbled on, as the common folk swayed helplessly, the truth blazed brighter in every heart. Zara was no mere servant. She was a force they could no longer deny. Lord Darien stumbled into the great hall of his manor, chest heaving, soaked with rain. His boots slipped on the marble floor, his mind reeling. Servants scattered from his path, their eyes wide with unspoken terror, for though they too had felt the magic, none dared speak of it yet. The storm winds howled through the shattered windows above the square, and in their haunting chorus, Darien heard a truth that chilled him to the marrow. His power was broken. His guards, once his iron hand upon the town, had failed him. His noble allies, now seen stumbling and swaying in the square like drunkards, would not defend him. And Zara? Zara, the chained girl, stood at the heart of it all, her gaze calm, her chains no longer a symbol of shame but of strength. He could no longer lie to himself. The people had seen it. They had felt it. The air was thick with their realization. He barked out a command to the few remaining servants. "Fetch the high priest. Bring me the mage. Send word to the capital. I will have this which burned." But the words rang hollow even to his own ears. For outside the storm began to calm and the wild dance in the square slowed, stopped. It was not Zara who moved first, it was the chains. The hum that had bound the square faded, the last echoes vanishing into the wet stone streets. The unseen pulse that had seized every limb now slipped away like the passing of a tide. The villagers, one by one, found themselves free. But they did not flee. No one fled. Instead, as the rain slowed to a soft drizzle, a new sound filled the square, low at first, then growing louder, voices rising in a great murmur of anger, guilt, and newfound purpose. "Justice," someone said aloud. "We saw it. We felt it. She stood for us," said another. "She is the truth," cried a merchant's wife, her voice shaking. He is the shame of this town." And the people, their numbers swelling, turned as one toward the manor. Toward Lord Darien. Zara remained still in the square, her chains trailing like ribbons at her feet. The rain plastered her hair across her face, but her eyes burned bright, calm and unwavering. The old traveler stood beside her now, silent, watchful. "Do not fear," he said softly to her. "Let them rise." The people surged forward, not in blind riot, but with grim determination. They came from every alley, every doorway, farmers, smiths, fishmongers, servants, even minor nobles ashamed of their silence. Lord Darien's name echoed in angry voices. At last, Darien himself, pale and trembling, was dragged into view by two of his own shaken guards, men who once served him with loyalty now unable to meet his gaze. The proud lord was a pitiful sight, rain-soaked, his velvet doublet torn, boots scuffed, hair clinging to his forehead. He looked upon the crowd and knew, this was no simple mob. This was a people awakened. And at the center of their gaze stood Zara. For a long moment no one spoke. The people parted slowly, leaving a path between them. Darien's guards pushed him forward, and he fell to his knees upon the wet stones, before the girl he had sought to break. "Mercy," he cried, voice cracking. I was misled, bewitched." But even he could hear the emptiness in his words. Zara raised her head. Her eyes met his, and in their calm, unyielding gaze, he felt a power beyond any spell, the strength of truth, the weight of justice long denied. He could not rise, could not look away. And in that silence the people saw, their tyrant was undone. One by one voices rose. For the lives stolen. For the chains. For her. For all of us. The cry swelled into a great shout, a demand not for vengeance but for justice. A reckoning not only for Zara, but for every injustice the town had suffered beneath this man's rule. Darian trembled. "Please," he whispered. "Spare me." But Zara, though battered and weary, stood tall. Her voice rang clear, strong despite the exhaustion in her body. "I asked for no vengeance," she said. "Only freedom. Only dignity. The chains you placed upon me now bind you." Her words hung in the air like a blade. The old traveler stepped forward, speaking for all to hear. "Let it be known, the curse is broken. The girl stands free, not by sorcery but by will. Let the people judge what justice must be." And the people answered. A vote, called there in the square by voice and by raised hands. None opposed. Lord Darian's rule was ended. The guards, at last free from their own shame, took him away, not with cruelty but with firm, undeniable purpose. Zara watched them go, her breath trembling but steady. Around her the people knelt, not in servitude but in respect. The chains at her feet gleamed faintly, no longer a mark of oppression but a symbol of her unbroken spirit. And in the hearts of all present, a truth was etched that would never be forgotten. A girl in chains had stood alone, and by the strength of her heart had freed them all. The morning after the storm broke over Erevan was unlike any the town had ever seen. The square, once a place of punishment, of cruelty and spectacle, now thrummed with a different kind of energy, one born of hope. Zara stood at the center of it all. She had not moved for hours after Lord Darian was dragged away, her heart pounding, her body weary from the night's magic. Around her, the people of Erevan remained gathered, unwilling to leave as if needing to bear witness to the full turning of the day. The first light of dawn spread softly across the wet stones, gilding the broken clouds. The rain had stopped. In the hush that followed the night's chaos, a quiet reverence filled the air. The old traveler, the sorcerer whose words had guided her, stepped forward at last. His voice, though gentle, carried through the square. "It is finished." The people murmured, many lowering their heads in silent respect. Zara felt the weight of her chains still wrapped around her wrists and ankles. Though their curse was broken, they remained, cold iron that had bound her for too long. And then, without a word, something began to happen. One by one the villagers approached, smiths, weavers, merchants, young and old. No command was given, but each seemed to understand. They gathered in a wide circle around Zara, leaving space for her to stand tall. A blacksmith, whose hammer had once shaped iron for the Lord's prisons, now stepped forward. In his hand he carried a simple tool, no weapon, just a wedge of tempered steel. He knelt before Zara. "May I?" he asked softly. Zara looked down at him, tears in her eyes, and nodded. With careful hands the blacksmith worked at the locks. The old iron groaned under his skill, weakened by the magic of the night before. The first shackle, that which bound her right wrist, snapped open with a dull clang upon the stones. The crowd gasped. Some wept. One by one the remaining locks were broken, wrist, ankle, ankle again, until the final chain fell away, ringing against the stone as though marking the moment for history. Zara stood free. For a heartbeat all was still. Then the people surged forward, not to trap her, not to command her, but to lift her up. Gentle hands supported her arms and shoulders. Voices rose, some calling her name, others chanting words of joy. The young and old gathered round, lifting her upon their shoulders in triumph. "Zara! Zara of the chains!" they cried. "No," the old traveler said softly, "Zara of freedom." And then, without cue or command, the music began. A lone drum, an old man tapping a simple beat upon a wooden skin. Then a second drum joined, then pipes, then voices lifted in song. No one knew who started it. It did not matter. Zara, held aloft, laughed through tears. She stepped down at last from their shoulders, her feet light upon the stone. And there, in the square where she had once danced in chains, she began to move. No longer a forced dance. No longer under cruel command. A dance of freedom, her own rhythm, her own steps. She spun, arms lifted to the sky. Her bare feet slid and turned upon the stone. The old rain glistened beneath her, catching the morning light, as if the earth itself celebrated with her. The people joined her. First one, then another, then many, not compelled by magic but by the joy of it. A true dance born of the heart. They moved together, a sea of bodies and smiles, young and old alike, all sharing in her victory. Word of the night's events spread like wildfire. Before the sun had reached its zenith, messengers carried the tale beyond Erevan, to nearby towns, then to cities, then to the capital itself. In the weeks that followed, change began to ripple through the kingdom. No longer would lords be permitted to chain the innocent for their amusement. No longer would the voices of the lowborn be ignored. Zara's name, and her dance, became legend. Travelers came to Erevan to see the square where a girl had turned chains into a symbol of courage. Children learned new songs sung in the markets and fields. She danced in chains by cruel command. Now free, her steps remake the land. And through it all, Zara remained the same. She chose no high title, took no wealth. Instead, she taught others, young girls and boys, how to dance with pride, how to move with the strength of their own spirits. Each year, on the day of her freedom, the town held a festival. The people gathered in the square not to watch one girl suffer, but to dance together in joy, a living memory of what had been and what could never be again. And when Zara danced, unbound, unbroken, the kingdom remembered. No chain could hold the heart that chose to be free. Years passed. The town of Erevan changed as all towns do with time, but one truth remained unchanged: the tale of Zara, the girl who once danced in chains and made the world dance by her stillness. That story had taken on a life of its own. It was whispered in distant markets, sung by wandering minstrels, carved into wooden beams in taverns far beyond the kingdom's borders. Travelers spoke of the girl who had stood alone beneath the storm and broken the will of a cruel lord, not with weapons or sorcery, but with the strength of her heart. The tale grew as tales do, each telling adding some new turn of phrase, some brighter flourish, but always the heart of it remained true. In Erevan itself, the memory of that stormy night lived not merely in words, but in tradition. Each year, as the rains of early spring faded and the warm winds of summer arrived, the townsfolk gathered in the square, the very stones where Zara had once stood, to honor her. They called it the Festival of Freedom. At first, it had been a small thing, a gathering of those who had been there that night wanting to remember. The old traveler, before vanishing back to the roads he loved, had helped shape its beginning. You must not let this fade, he had told them. Not for her alone, but for all who will need courage one day. And so, with a single drum and a simple circle of dancers, the first festival had begun. But as the years passed, it grew. Merchants began to arrive days in advance, their carts laden with wares and bright cloth. Artisans painted the walls of the square with symbols of chains turned to ribbons, of bare feet upon wet stone, of a lone figure standing proud beneath a stormlit sky. Children wore simple charms shaped like the links of broken chains, reminders of the past. And at the heart of the celebration was the dance. It began always in silence. At the hour when the first light of dawn touched the stones, the same hour when Zara had once stood still, a great hush fell upon the crowd. No music played. No voice called out. Instead, the people of Erevan gathered quietly in the square, young and old, nobles and commoners alike. They stood side by side waiting. And then, from among them, a single dancer would step forward, barefoot, unchained, dressed simply. This dancer, chosen each year for courage and spirit, would stand alone at the square's center. There was no forced movement, no command. They would begin when their heart willed it, when they felt ready. And when that first step came, slow, deliberate, free, the crowd would answer. Music would rise. Drums, flutes, pipes, and voices would join in a swelling chorus, and the square would burst into joyous motion. All would dance, not for spectacle but in celebration of freedom. Year after year the festival grew. Bards came from distant cities to witness it. Young girls in other towns whispered of Zara's strength and dreamed of dancing in her honor. Even the king himself, a wise ruler who had outlawed the cruel entertainments of the past, sent envoys to Erevan bearing gifts and praise. Yet through it all, Zara herself remained humble. She had never claimed a throne, never sought riches. Her life was simple, a small home on the edge of town, where she taught dance to any who wished to learn. But she was loved. In the markets, people greeted her with smiles. Children ran to her with wide eyes, begging for a story or a lesson. And when the festival came, it was she who lit the first lantern each year, a soft flame placed upon the old balcony where Lord Darien had once stood. One year, when Zara grew older and her steps slowed, the people asked her, "What do you wish us to remember?" And she answered with words as simple as her heart. That no chain is stronger than the spirit that refuses to break. That silence can speak louder than cruelty. That a single still moment can set the world to moving. These words were carved in stone upon the square's edge for all to read. And so the legend lived on. Dancers came from across the kingdom, some to honor, some to learn. Poets wrote of the girl who had faced her oppressor without fear. And in distant lands, where new tyrants sought to bend the will of the people, the tale of Zara was whispered in the dark, a light to those who needed hope. Years became decades. New generations were born. But still each year at dawn the people gathered in the square. And somewhere among them, in the gaze of a young dancer, in the first soft note of a drum, the spirit of Zara remained. For some legends fade. But those born of truth, of courage, of a single heart refusing to yield, live forever.